Okay. All right, Sarah, it's time for church. All right, we're going to go ahead and pray, and we will get started. Uh, so let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, we love you. We are thankful, God, for your grace, your mercy in our lives. Pray, Lord, that you'd bless our time together this morning. Lord, that above all else, God, that we would be gathered, Lord, to hear from you and to worship you, God. Lord, we pray that, Lord, we would be focused, God, and that our attendance, Father, our attention would bring you glory this morning. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we covered some of this last week. I'm going to do kind of a quick review, and then we're going to do a little bit of discussion time. So Genesis chapter 1, and nope, that is the wrong slideshow. Perfect. So we are not going to go through the slides, but I'll cover just some of the things that we covered this week. So yesterday was a very busy day. We drove back and forth to Bakersfield, so I did not get as much done on this. So would have liked to have got done. So. But anyway, so Genesis chapter 1, verse number 26, 27, 28, he says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." So what we're talking about is the sanctity of life, right? And so the question obviously arises, and there's been a great deal of discussion even in our present, especially in our present, I guess, political environment, right, concerning the matter of the sanctity of life, right? When does life begin? Does the value of a life change just simply because it becomes inconvenient, right? And so those questions, they're not only crucial, right, to our understanding of life, but they are important for us to answer on a personal level, right? And so your answer to those things reveals, at least in part, it reveals your worldview, right? And so we already talked about what a worldview is, but a worldview is very simply the lens through which you see the world, right? Your worldview is the window frame of the structure that you're looking out, right? So we all live on the same planet, right? Whether you're lost or whether you're saved. So, hey, we're having service. If you guys want to have a conversation, there's the door. Thank you. We talked about, right, everyone's worldview is limited, right? And everyone's worldview is also fallible, right? You're not 100% correct all the time about everything. It may blow your mind to find that out, right? But you're not always right. And so even though, right, even in the world of Christianity, right, even in the church world where we say, well, everything I believe is based on the Bible, just because you have one perspective concerning the matter doesn't mean that everybody holds your perspective, doesn't mean that your perspective is always right. right? Because if you're honest about it, right, your perspective on some things has changed over the course of time, right? And so things shift and things change. That is the way that the world around us works, right? And so that's we need to remember a couple of very basic things, right? First, we should always keep in mind that truth does matter, even in a world where the world says that truth is not as important as maybe it once was, right? And everybody says it's my truth, right? It's your truth, my truth, their truth. The reality is there's only truth, right? And there can't be your truth and my truth, right? There can be your opinion and my opinion, but not your truth and my truth, because if your truth is not the same as my truth, then one of our truths is not a truth, right? And so we have to keep that in mind. The other thing that matters that we should remember, right, is that our tone does matter. It does matter to God, the tone in which we speak, not only to others, right, in this world, but the tone that we speak to people who are lost as well as people who are saved. Right? Oftentimes we get the idea in our head that it's just because of what I believe, it's just because of the stand I take, right, that everybody hates me, when the reality is it has nothing to do with the stand you take or what you believe. It really has to do with the tone that you take with the world, right? And that's why people just don't like you, right? And so sometimes we blame God for the reason that people don't like us, when the reality is people don't like us because of us. Right, we've got a bad attitude, right? We are sour, right? We're bitter about life, right? Bitter about maybe the direction our life has taken, things that have happened in our life. Ephesians chapter 4, verse number 15 says, "But speaking the truth in love, they may grow up, right, into all things, into Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ," right? So I know that that abortion can be a difficult topic to talk about, right? But it is increasingly, right, a topic of conversation. It's a topic of conversation for most high schoolers that are sitting in this room. At some point, the topic's going to come up, whether it comes from a teacher in a classroom or from a peer. It is going to come up at some point as to where you stand on things like abortion, because politics have so influenced even our educational system, right? So we need to remember that God's grace is deep, and it's deep enough, right, for discussions about the topic of abortion, right? That we can have those discussions. We can have those discussions in a manner that pleases God, right? So some things, right, that fall into this discussion is, right, our worldview is this, that we are formed in the image of God. We believe that because of Genesis, the verses that we just read in Genesis. But that's why we believe that we're formed in the image of God. If we are formed in the image of God, then we have value as a result of that. Right? Our value does not come from our competency, from our abilities, right? From our looks, from our skill set, right? Our value comes from the fact that we are made in the image of God. And so it's hard sometimes to figure out exactly what it means that we are created in the image of God. The Bible tells us in John 4, right, God is a spirit, they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth, right? And so we know that it's not so much our physical appearance that makes us made in the image of God as it is, right, the makeup of who we are really as a human being, right? And so we are made in the image of God, the Bible tells us, and human life is a sacred value to God. In fact, the word sacred means that it belongs to God, right? That's why we say that life, the sanctity of life, right? That life is sacred. And we believe that life is sacred because it belongs to God. And so most of us sitting in this room, we own things that are of value to us. Right? Well, we belong to God. We are made in God's image. We belong to God. And so there is something about human life, obviously, that is very significant to God. What makes that significant to God is, right, Genesis 2:7, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living soul, right? So when man is something more than what we see of each other. right? There is something inside of us that makes us what we are, right? We are more than what you see. And so that's why, right, if you've ever been around somebody who is getting older, right, or maybe even, right, I can remember when Mrs. J passed away, right, and they tried to keep her body basically breathing until all the kids got into town, right? Her body was breathing, but Mrs. J was not there anymore, right? When you die, your body will be here, but you won't be. Right? So there is more to us than this body. There is more to the sanctity of life than this body, right? So the Bible tells us in Psalms chapter 103, verse 1, bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me, right? Bless his holy name. It is the psalmist's soul that he is talking about. The Spirit of God in Job 33:4, the Spirit of God made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life, right? And so human life has value because it is sacred. It belongs to God. The human life has a very specific beginning, right? There's a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion over history, even among Christians, as to when does life really begin, right? Does it begin when the baby takes its first breath outside of the womb? Right? When does life really begin? We hold to the position that life begins at conception. We hold to that because Jeremiah 1:5 tells us, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, right? Psalms 139, thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb, right? Even in the law in Exodus chapter 21, verse 22, if men strive and hurt a woman with child so that her fruit departs from her, yet no mischief follow, he shall surely be punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine, right? And he says, and if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life, right? He says, if it was on purpose, that's it, man. There's no hope for you, right? Why? Because what's in that woman's womb is life, right? It's not just something that can be cast aside. It's not as the world likes to say now, right? It's not a parasite. It's not just a clump of cells, right? There is something there. Right, it is human, right? It is life, and there is sanctity to it, right? We should hold it as that, as valuable because of that, right? Even Elizabeth, when Mary shows up with Jesus, right? Even Elizabeth, John jumps in Elizabeth's womb, right? Because it's the mother of Jesus. And so there was obviously life and understanding in these things going on before John ever comes out of the womb, right? And so the scripture tells us certainly that there is value to life there. Human life has a very special purpose, right? In Isaiah chapter 43, verse 7, he says, even everyone that is called by my name, for I have created him for my glory, I have formed him, yea, I have made him. God is intricately involved in the formation of every human being, and every human being has value and has worth because every human being has a call from God. It's got a purpose from God. You are not purposeless, right? You may feel like you're purposeless because maybe, right, life has not gone the way that you thought it was going to go. Maybe you're unhappy with yourself, right, because you've not faced life head on. Maybe you're hiding from life, and so you're miserable and bitter with yourself because of it. Right? There's a lot of things that can happen, right? Maybe, people have bullied you or whatever, and so you think your life has no purpose, but life has purpose. Right? You were not accidentally made by God. There's purpose to you. God has given you life. And if God has given you life, you should hold that life as a gift from God. Your life is a gift from God, and you should treat it as such. Right? One of the reasons that we don't believe that suicide, whether assisted or otherwise, is acceptable, right, is because life is a gift from God. And to take the life that God has given you and snuff it out would be to, right, spit on the gift that God has given you, and that is not okay in any way, shape, or form, right? Obviously, life, right? Man fell into sin in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2, or Genesis chapter 1 and 2, right? There's this beautiful work of creation, but by chapter 3, man has chosen to take the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? We all know the story. In fact, I assume that most of us understand the story, right, of Adam and Eve. And listen, when Adam and Eve sin in the Garden of Eden, right, it's easy for us to look back now and say, yeah, well, I can't believe that they would do that. But the reality is that's what we choose every day, right? Every day we're choosing a path that God has picked for us or the path that we have chosen for ourselves. And if most of us are honest, I think we'd say, right, we pick the path that we choose for ourselves more often than the path that God has chosen for us, right? But when that happens, man falls into sin, right? There are consequences as a result of that. But even that, right, there's still value in life. Despite the fact that man has fallen into sin, there's still value in life, right? The value of life did not cease because man fell into sin, right? And so there's still value to life. The damage that was done was great. Romans chapter 5, verse 12 tells us, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Right? The fall was certainly devastating. It brought a lot of things. It brought death. It brought disease. It brought destruction into this world. But it did not change the value of human life. The value of human life was protected, right? It would be like a picture, right, or a work of art hanging on your wall in a frame, right? If it fell off the wall and the frame broke, you would not say, well, that's useless now, right? No, right? The artwork would still be of value, right? Even damaged artwork is of value. In fact, most of the artwork we have is damaged, right? Most of the historical artwork that we have is damaged artwork that we have done our best to restore. But a lot of the artwork, it's the damage that makes it valuable, right? In some cases. And so life still has value. Just because man broke the frame that God had set for man does not mean that life lost its value. We know that because, not just because I say so, but listen, in Exodus, right, when we get the 10 Commandments, one of them is what? Thou shalt not kill, right? Don't take life, right? And so Genesis 9:6 tells us, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. Right, so there are some people who say things, right, like, well, if you don't believe in abortion, then you can't believe in the death penalty, right? And we would say that's right. We believe in the death penalty because, right, we believe in the value and sanctity of life, right? And so if you take another individual's life, you have broken that value, right? And to protect the lives of all others, we must eliminate your life to protect their lives. Right? It's the same thing as, right, well, if you don't believe in abortion, then you can't believe in protecting your country, right? You can't believe in war and these types of things, right? And self-defense, you can't believe in that if you believe in the sanctity of life. No, because we believe in the sanctity of life, we believe in self-defense. Right? It is my moral obligation to protect the sanctity of the lives of those who are under my watch care, right? And if that means that I have to take your life in order to protect their lives, that is my moral obligation, right? So if even right after the fall of man, life still bears its sanctity. We'll look at some scientific facts a little bit here in a minute, right? But the way the world looks at it, right, is very simply, so what? Right? Even if abortion does end a life, so what? Right? And any person who does believe in abortion, if they're honest, that is what they believe, right, at the end of the day. They do believe that's life. None of them are going to argue with you whether it's life. They have changed definitions and all kinds of things in order to avoid saying that it's human life. But at the end of the day, they know it's a human life, right? If your dog was pregnant, you wouldn't think to yourself, well, I wonder if it's going to have little baby chickens, right? You don't look at a woman who's pregnant and think to yourself, well, she's going to have, how wonderful, she's going to have a clump of cells, right? No, right? And so even, right, no matter what they say, they know what it is. I'll give you the excerpt that we read from the Salon magazine, right, last time. Elizabeth Williams wrote an article called "So What If Abortion Ends Life," right? Here's what she wrote. She wrote, "I believe that life starts at conception and never stops me. It has never stopped me from being pro-choice." She said, "I know that throughout my own pregnancies, I never wavered for a moment in the belief that I was carrying a human life inside of me. I believe that what a fetus is a human life. And that doesn't make me one iota less solidly pro-choice. I have friends who refer to their abortions in terms of scraping out a bunch of cells, and then a few years later were exultant over the pregnancies that they unhesitatingly described in terms of the baby in this kid. I know women who have been relieved at their abortions and grieved over their miscarriages. Why can't we agree that it's pretty silly to pretend what was growing inside of them wasn't the same? When we try to act like a pregnancy doesn't involve human life, we wind up drawing stupid semantic lines in the sand. First trimester abortions or versus second trimester versus late term, dancing around the issue, trying to decide if there's a single magic moment when a fetus becomes a person. Are you only human when you're born, or only when you're viable outside of the womb? Are you less of a human when you look like a tadpole than when you can suck on your thumb? If by some random fluke I learned today that I was pregnant, you bet I'd have an abortion. I'd have the world's greatest abortion. My conviction is that the fetus is indeed a life worth sacrificing. Right? And that is the position, right, of every person who believes in abortion. Right? They believe it's a life. They just don't believe it's worth anything. Right? They don't believe that life is worth anything. The Bible tells us in John 3:19, this is the condemnation, that light came into the world. Men loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. Right? And so why is it that man can do what they do despite the fact that they believe that it is a human life? They do it because they have chosen darkness rather than light. And many people do, right? Most of us can think of times even in our own lives, right, when we've chose darkness over light. But you continue to choose darkness over light, and one day you'll wake up blind. Right? And that's where the world finds itself, right? Give you some statistics here. 22% of pregnancies end in abortion. The United States of America aborts approximately 1.3 million babies every year. That's as many abortions every year as the number of Americans who were killed in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, the Persian Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghan all combined. Right? So what are we doing? We're wiping out a generation. That's what we're doing. We're wiping out a generation and acting like life doesn't matter. Right? We wonder why young people and right, adults as well, I guess, but right, we wonder why so many young people don't value their life or the lives of others. Right? They don't value it because we have taught them not to value it, right, by wiping out generations worth of young people, right, by way of abortion. And so the Bible tells us in Romans 1:29, right, being filled with all unrighteousness, right? He goes on to say in verse 32 that they were full of murder, right? Knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. And that is, right, certainly the world that we find ourselves in, right, when things like hashtag shout your abortion go around, right, on social media and these types of things. It's a problem, right? And it's a problem that we as believers should address. Governor Cuomo, right, is in January of 2019, Governor Cuomo directed one of the spires of the World Trade Center to be lit up pink in celebration of the Reproductive Health Act, right? That was a bill that expanded abortion rights and decriminalized the practice. Supporters chanted, "Free abortion on demand. We can do it. Yes, we can," right? They're rallying around death. Ryan Baumberger, said, "Abortion activists worship abortion. It's sacred to them. Nothing on earth, according to the faithful, should ever desecrate the holy ground upon which this ritual is performed over 1,000 times a day, even if that ground is soaked with the blood of women and killed and maimed and babies brutally murdered after being born alive." And that is the world we live in, right? That's the America that our young people are growing up in. There's a reason we should take these things seriously, right? And people say, well, I'm just not comfortable discussing these types of topics with my children and stuff like that. Let me tell you something. You may not be comfortable discussing it, but their peers are very comfortable discussing it with them, as are other adults in their lives. So if you don't discuss it with them, somebody's going to discuss it with them, right? Right, the response to this issue, the response to the issue of life, right? As Christians, we agree, right, in the sanctity of life. We believe that life is worth fighting for, right? And so the Bible has established the ground that we are, right, supposed to be the salt and light in this world. We're supposed to be the pillar and ground of the truth. Right? And so the reality is abortion is nothing new. Hippocrates in 460 BC, right, in the Hippocratic Oath said, I will not give to a woman a pessary to cause an abortion. Right? Plato and Aristotle, on the other hand, right, recommended it for population control, right? Aristotle wrote, as to the exposure and rearing of children, let there be a law that no deformed child shall live, but that on the ground of excess in number of children, when couples have children in excess, let abortion be procured before sense and life have begun. Right? Life is cheap in that kind of a setting. Right? And then, by the way, that is what they're saying, right? All you got to do is listen to them, right? Don't you want to have a test for your baby? Find out whether your baby has Down syndrome or something like that. That way you know whether you want to keep it. Right? Listen, these are the things that happen. These are the tests that are performed. Right? What if don't you want to be sure that your child's going to be viable, that they're not going to have any major issues, right? Before you decide whether you want to keep it. Right, but those are not even the vast majority of abortions. The vast majority of abortions are performed for one simple reason, right? They just don't want the baby. It's late term, right? It's basically family planning after the fact. Right, it's to escape the consequences of actions. That is what most of them are for. That's the reason for most abortions, right? We should respond with clarity to this, right? Like we read in the article by Elizabeth Williams, right? She said, in the midst of this unique moment, Planned Parenthood has taken the bold step of reframing the vernacular, moving away from the easy and easily divisive words like life and choice. Instead, a new promotional film acknowledges it's not a black and white issue, right? The world is trying to obscure the issue, but we need to be very clear about it. We need to be very clear that viability doesn't determine the value of a life. Whether something can survive by itself does not determine whether it is valuable. This will blow your mind, but the baby in the womb that can't survive by itself also can't survive by itself outside the womb. If you think it can, you're delusional, right? Viability is no excuse. And if we're going to go with viability, then that means that when you stop being of value to us, we're just allowed to off you at any point in time. Right? You're in a horrible car accident that causes you brain damage. Can I now just kill you with impunity? I'm not talking about pulling the plug. I'm talking about, man, I can just kill you. Right? None of us believe that's acceptable, right? Cognizance, right? We don't believe that cognizance makes something of value. We don't believe that somebody's IQ is what determines whether they have value or not. If it was determined by that, right, none of us would have value, most of us, until the age of about 23 or 24, because most of the young people are pretty brain dead. Right? Some of them last a lot longer than that. So, right? But, if it goes on cognizance, does that mean that when somebody slips into a coma, we should just stop feeding them and let them starve to death and die? Nobody believes that to be true. Right? We need to be clear that it doesn't matter whether it's at the age of 60, whether it's at the age of 30, whether it's at the age of 10, whether it's at the age of 1, or whether it is before a child is born. We don't believe that cognizance determines the value of that life. Right? We need to be very clear that heartbeat is not what gives something a right? There are those who say, well, it's fine to abort it up until the heartbeat. It's not really alive, right? That's a horrible way to determine it, because that means that anybody that's just off them, because that's not actually their heartbeat, right? That's crazy. That also means that as soon as somebody, right, as soon as somebody's heart, right, skips a beat, right, you're good to go, right? You can off them because, hey, you know, they got problems. No, you know what we do? We throw everything we can at them, from the iron lung to pacemakers and everything else, to keep people alive. You know why? Because we do believe, it's ingrained in us, that life has value. We've just been duped, and especially a lot of young people have been duped into believing that if it's not outside the womb, that life doesn't have value, but it does, right? I went over these days, right? But day one, on the day of conception, all 46 chromosomes are present when a human life begins, right? At 3 weeks, the child's heart begins to beat. At 5 weeks, they've got eyes, legs, hands. They begin to develop. Right? At 6 weeks, the brain has waves. Right? We've got brain waves, and they've been active for some time. They're just finally detectable. The baby starts kicking at 7 weeks and swimming around, right? Every organ in that baby's body is in place. The bones are beginning to take shape, and fingerprints have begun to form. At 10 weeks, the baby has teeth, right? And they begin to form. Their fingernails develop. They can turn their head. They can frown. They can make faces. At 3 months, the baby can grasp onto objects, oftentimes grabbing their own umbilical cord. At 4 months, the baby starts to have dreams during REM sleep, right? Listen, the research shows that 84% of mothers decide not to have an abortion if they are shown an ultrasound prior to the abortion. Right? So, we went over Abby Johnson, right? You can look Abby Johnson up on YouTube, but she's a nurse who was in an abortion clinic after seeing so many abortions, right, happen. She finally, her perspective on it finally changed after she saw an ultrasound of an abortion in progress, and watched the child try to move away, right, push itself away. She changed her opinion on it, and now goes around speaking on the topic, right? So we need to respond with conviction about it. Right? We believe that if, right, the most famous case, right, that people try to make in opposition to abortion is, what about rape? Right? You know what we believe in cases of rape? We believe that the rapist should be held responsible. That's what we believe. But we don't believe the taking of one life, the taking of the life of the innocent for the life of the rapist is acceptable. Right? That's not the way to, that doesn't solve anything. Right? So we're gonna break up. We'll do some discussion here. Right? But before we do that, give you a couple of things just right to that we can do. First of all, right, we can pray. Right? We ought to pray about the issue of abortion, right, in the United States of America. We ought to speak. We ought to open our mouths. We ought to speak. Foster and adoption are ways of combating this thing. Right? There's in fact, Angel Studios made an entire movie about a church, right, that they made it their mission, right, to adopt every child out of the system in their city, right? I think the movie's called Possum Trot, if I remember right. The Sound of Hope, right? So we ought to educate other people, and we ought to educate ourselves on the topic, right? You ought to pay attention to it, and certainly as you vote, you ought to keep those things in mind. All right, we're going to go ahead and dismiss. We'll break up for discussion. So teens, you can head out with Ethan. What do I have here? Yeah, we're just about right. So question number one, right? what does the incarnation, right, or the facts surrounding the birth of Christ, right, particularly the 9 months from his conception to his birth, right? What does that tell us about the personhood of an unborn baby, or the humanity of an unborn baby? This is your time to talk, not mine. I've done all the talking I'm doing for now. So what do the facts surrounding the birth of Christ, right? What do they tell us about, right, about the child in the womb, basically? Yes, sir. Right? So John recognizing him, right, means that there's a connection there, right? It's humanity, right? It's something beyond just a clump of cells. What did the angel tell Mary? She was going to conceive, right? And bring forth a child, right? But he tells her that she's going to bear, right? He says, you're going to bear who? You'll bear the Messiah, right? Not you're going to give birth to the Messiah, right? You're going to bear the Messiah in your womb, right? That means that there's something more to it, right? If someone you know came to you and told you that they were thinking about having an abortion, what are some questions that you can raise, right, to basically get a conversation going, right, that would allow you to address their concerns? Yep. Right. Why do you need to get an abortion? Right. That's certainly that's a good starting point, right? Listen, a lot of people, man, the world has just convinced people that there's nothing to this, right? Because most people don't really pay any attention to the facts. Like, they pay no attention to the number of women that die, right, in the midst of abortions. This happens all the time. Women are severely injured due to abortions. A lot of women who have abortions can never have children following that because they're damaged following it, right? So certainly, right? Why do you think you need to have an abortion, right? What are some ways, right? Some things that we can say that will take them in the right direction. Right? How about, have you looked into other options? Right? Is that the only option you have? Right? If there were other options available to you, would you consider them? Right? Because there are a lot of other options available. Right? You can surrender children, right? And adoption, obviously, right? Me and Sarah have done that a couple of times now, right? And so there are certainly some other things to do there, right? Some other things, right, that we can ask that would put them in the right, right, basically take the question, right, deeper, right, is, right, how do you think this is going to weigh on you after the fact? Right, because most of us, all we see is the women, right, that are on television screaming at the top of their lungs, right, I had an abortion, I'm so great, it was great, and all this other stuff. But that's not the majority of women. The majority of women who end up having abortions, right, it's pretty devastating. Like, postpartum is not just for having given birth, right? When a woman has a miscarriage, right, she is devastated by it. Abortion devastates them in the same mental way, right? Right, some other ways, right, especially if there are many who would claim to be believers, right, that would still go down this path, isn't there? Right, and so, right, we should keep them, right, we should keep them focused on, right, some important things, right? God's got a purpose for everybody. You have no idea what the purpose for the child that you're going to bear is. I don't know who originated it, right? But many people have said, right, that like when you think about it, right, think of all of the inventions, right? For all we know, we've aborted the doctor who had the cure for cancer, right? And so we should keep some of those things certainly in mind. So the other thing I think we ought to do, right, would be to encourage those who are expecting, right, and women who are single moms, right, right. We ought to encourage them. Right, we ought to be an encouragement to them. What are some things you think we can do that would be an encouragement to a mother who, right, may be either expecting, right, or even for someone who is maybe a single mom? Don't everybody talk at once. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So providing, right, or at least having, right, the social, knowing where they can go, right, being able to direct them in the right direction, or opening even, right, your home to them. What are some other things we can do? Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. I know some people don't come to church to think, but I didn't come here to think. Good Lord. Put it on a piece of paper and I'll take it home. Right. Right, there's a lot of things that we can do, right, obviously. One thing is, right, if you have children, you should, right, you can share with them, right? Like, listen, children are a joy, right? They've got, like, right, everybody's got, right, kids can be a little crazy, right? We all go through difficult times with our children. But man, children put value in your life, right? And so kids make life a lot more fun, right? They give you purpose. A lot of people really have no purpose outside of their family, right? Kids give you purpose. They give you a reason to get up in the morning, right? Because they may be already in the kitchen, right, pulling stuff out. But right, but kids give you purpose, right? Kids are really of great value. Right. I think the other thing, right, we can speak out on that type of stuff, right? We can write notes, right? You can offer to babysit. There's a lot of things we can do in that realm, right? But the other thing I think that we should, as believers, right, we live in a world that's increasingly online, right? Increasingly draws its opinions from places online, right? The number of times that I will hear or read something right, online, and then hear it repeated by somebody that I know, right? It's on a pretty frequent basis now, right? And so social media and those types of things, those are places where we need to show up, be present, right, and not engage in arguments, right, and fighting with people, but we should keep our opinion in the public eye. I'm afraid for a lot of us as believers, we have taken a back seat, right? Like if you go back, social media now, right, is literally the same thing as standing on a street corner, right, 50, 60, 75, even 100 years ago. Right, you wanted to get your opinion out, right, you stood on a street corner and, you let it out. In fact, I was watching something for business earlier this week, and guy said, we get ourselves convinced that things are so bad politically and all this other stuff, right? And then he showed two advertisements from Andrew Jackson, I think, and Coolidge. And Coolidge said about Andrew Jackson that if Andrew Jackson gets elected, that right, it's just gonna be chaos. Your women are gonna get raped, right? I mean, it's just gonna be, right? I mean, they're just gonna be the wheels are off the bus sexually, right? And Andrew Jackson said about Coolidge, he's just trying to get his daughter married off to King George's son, and right, if you elect him, right, you're just going to be bringing all of that chaos from Europe here, right? Things, right? And so, listen, we used to stand on the street corner and say something, right? We watch all these people out on the street corner holding up picket signs and all that kind of stuff. Listen, social media is That is the street corner now. Uh, oh yeah. Uh, yep. Yep. So, right, but we have the opportunity, right, to put our opinion, right, in the same space, right, as them too. So, yes, sir. Yeah. 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 I'm a firm believer that it's going to be maybe I figured about 5 years, but I think probably less than that now. And there's going to be some real value back in the written books, right? In printed books, and that are and authorship, right? Because I can recognize AI from a mile away. You know, like I can read something and just about 9 times out of 10, I can tell whether it was written by AI or not. Um, you know, and so because there's no soul in it, you know. Like you read an author's work, there's their heart and soul's in there, you know, when you're reading it. I think there's going to be value back in that stuff. Same thing with artwork, right? We're going to find it, I think, in artwork again pretty soon too. Uh, and so we'll. Let me see. Am I supposed to be dismissing? They keep telling me that I dismiss late. So, yep, I probably should dismiss. All right, we'll go ahead and dismiss. We'll be back in here in about 10 minutes.